In the grand corridors of the German High Command in Paris, she moved with elegant confidence, her high heels clicking on marble floors as German officers nodded respectfully and stepped aside. They knew her as a wealthy French socialite, a woman of impeccable taste and connections who somehow managed to maintain her privileged lifestyle even under occupation. What they did not know was that every conversation she had with them, every document she glimpsed on their desks, every careless word spoken in her presence was being carefully memorized and passed to Allied intelligence. Her name was Jeannie Rousseau, and she became one of the most valuable intelligence agents of World War II, not through training or technology, but through her brilliant mind and her understanding that men often underestimated women, especially beautiful ones. Jeannie was barely 20 years old when France fell to the Germans. She spoke fluent German, having studied in Germany before the war, and her family connections had given her access to French high society. When the occupation began, she could have fled to safety or simply kept her head down and survived. Instead, she made a choice that would put her life in constant danger for the next 4 years. She would become a spy, gathering intelligence on German military activities and passing it to the Allies. But unlike agents who were dropped behind enemy lines with training and equipment, Jeannie operated completely on her own, developing her methods through intelligence and instinct rather than formal instruction. Her first step was to position herself where she could access information. She took a job with an industrial organization that worked with German military procurement, a position that gave her legitimate reasons to interact with German officers and officials. The Germans never suspected that this young French woman posed any threat. They saw her as decorative and useful, someone who could translate documents and facilitate communications between French businesses and German authorities. They spoke freely in front of her, discussed military matters in her presence, and left documents on desks where she could see them. Jeannie understood that they had been taught to believe that women were intellectually inferior, incapable of understanding military or technical matters, and she used this prejudice against them brilliantly. What made Jeannie extraordinary was not just her access to information, but her ability to understand its significance. When German officers casually mentioned new weapon systems being developed, she asked innocent questions that seemed like mere curiosity, but were carefully designed to extract technical details. When they boasted about secret projects that would change the war, she appeared impressed and fascinated, encouraging them to elaborate. She learned about the V-1 flying bomb and the V-2 rocket program long before Allied intelligence knew these weapons existed. She gathered details about their range, their payload capacity, the locations where they were being developed and tested. She memorized everything because she could not risk taking notes that might be discovered. The challenge was passing this information to the Allies. Jeannie had no radio, no dead drops, no contact with established intelligence networks. She had to find her own ways to get information out of occupied France. She used trusted friends who were traveling to unoccupied zones, hiding messages in seemingly innocent letters that used codes she developed herself. She memorized not just facts but entire conversations, technical specifications, and strategic plans, then reconstructed them later in detailed reports. Her memory was extraordinary, able to retain complex technical information about weapon systems she had never seen, purely from descriptions and casual comments. The information Jeannie provided about the German V-weapon program was among the most valuable intelligence the Allies received during the war. When she reported that the Germans were developing rockets that could strike London from launch sites in France, Allied intelligence initially doubted the reports. The technology seemed too advanced, the descriptions too fantastic. But Jeannie's information was so detailed, so consistent, and so technically precise that they had to take it seriously. She had provided exact locations of development facilities, described the appearance and capabilities of the weapons, and even reported on production schedules and deployment plans. When Allied reconnaissance finally confirmed the existence of the V-weapon sites, they realized that this young French woman working alone had discovered one of Germany's most closely guarded secrets. Allied bombers struck the V-weapon facilities based on Jeannie's intelligence, delaying the deployment of these weapons by months. When the V-1 and V-2 attacks finally began, the Allies were prepared with countermeasures and defenses because Jeannie had given them time to develop responses. Historians have estimated that her intelligence saved thousands of lives in London and other cities that were targeted by these weapons. Yet throughout this period, she remained anonymous, unknown to the Germans who worked with her every day and unknown to the Allies who relied on her reports but knew her only by a code designation. Jeannie's deception required not just intelligence but extraordinary self-control. She had to remain friendly and charming with German officers while knowing that these same men were responsible for the deaths of her countrymen. She had to appear frivolous and apolitical while memorizing information that could help defeat them. She had to smile and flirt and play the role of a harmless young woman while her mind was working constantly, analyzing, memorizing, planning how to extract and transmit the information she gathered. The psychological strain of living this double life for years would have broken most people, but Jeannie maintained her cover flawlessly. Her luck finally ran out in early 1944. The Gestapo arrested her, though not because they suspected her of espionage. They were rounding up members of a resistance network she had helped, and she was caught in their sweep. Even under interrogation, she maintained her cover, insisting she was simply a translator who had no involvement in resistance activities. The Gestapo did not believe her, but they could not prove her role in intelligence work. They sent her to Ravensbrück concentration camp, one of the most brutal camps in the Nazi system, where she endured conditions designed to break prisoners physically and psychologically. In Ravensbrück, Jeannie discovered reserves of strength she had not known she possessed. She survived forced labor, starvation rations, disease, and the constant threat of execution. She maintained her spirit by helping other prisoners, sharing what little she had, and refusing to let the Nazis destroy her humanity. When the war ended and the camps were liberated, Jeannie emerged weighing barely 80 pounds, permanently damaged in health but unbroken in spirit. She had survived everything the Nazi system could inflict on her, and she had won. After the war, the extent of Jeannie's contributions to Allied intelligence slowly became known. The British awarded her the Order of the British Empire. France made her a Commander of the Legion of Honor. The United States recognized her contributions with commendations. But like many intelligence agents, she rarely spoke about her wartime activities. She had spent years hiding the truth, living a lie, and even after the war ended, she found it difficult to talk about those experiences. She had lost friends, endured torture and imprisonment, and lived with memories that never faded. What Jeannie Rousseau accomplished was remarkable, not just for its impact on the war, but for how she accomplished it. She had no training, no equipment, no support network. She operated entirely alone, developing her own methods for gathering and transmitting intelligence. She succeeded in one of the most dangerous forms of espionage, working directly with the enemy while pretending to be harmless and insignificant. She used their prejudices and assumptions against them, understanding that their belief in women's intellectual inferiority was a weakness she could exploit. Jeannie proved that intelligence work was not just about codes and radios and secret meetings in the dark. It was about understanding human psychology, about being able to read people and situations, about having the courage to take enormous risks for a cause greater than personal safety. She demonstrated that ordinary people without training or resources could make extraordinary contributions if they had the intelligence to see opportunities and the courage to act on them. The woman who secretly helped the Allies was not a professional spy or a trained soldier. She was a young French woman who spoke good German and had access to the right circles. What made her invaluable was her brilliant mind, her perfect memory, her understanding of human nature, and her absolute commitment to defeating Nazi tyranny. She gathered intelligence that changed the course of the war, saved thousands of lives, and helped ensure Allied victory. She did all this while appearing to be nothing more than a charming young socialite, decorative and harmless. The Germans never realized until too late that they had been fooled completely, that the woman they had dismissed as insignificant was one of the most effective intelligence agents operating against them. Jeannie Rousseau helped the Allies win the war by being smarter, braver, and more perceptive than the enemy ever imagined a woman could be.